Hey guys, it's Luke Yon, and today I am going to be talking about my favorite books of 2023. I really love doing this video every single year. Even though it's like fun sometimes to talk about books that I didn't love so much, I do really, of course, enjoy talking about books that I love. I mean, that's like the whole point of having a booktube channel. It's the whole reason I'm here, because I love books and I want to talk about my feelings about them. So, I'm super excited to tell you all about my favorite books of the last year, and I have actually 14 books to talk about. I had 13 5-star reads this year, which is the most that I've ever had, so I'm really happy about that. I had a really great reading year overall, and I'm going to talk more about that like in my year in review, but I do have one honorable mention and then 13 5-star reads that I want to discuss with you all, so let's just jump right in. So at number 14 is my honorable mention, and is actually a series, and that is the To All the Boys I've Loved Before series by Jenny Han. I read this entire trilogy in, it was either February or March, I think it might have been March, and I loved everything about it. I had seen the first movie adaptation in this series, like, when it came out, so like many years ago, and I really enjoyed it, and I was like, I had the books, but I was like, I don't think I'm ever going to get to these, but then I randomly decided to pick the first book up on a whim, and I had already owned the entire series, so I was like, let me just give the first book a try, and then it proceeded to take over my entire life for like a week. I read all 3 books back to back so quickly. I actually ended up reading Jenny Han's other series right after, which was not my favorite, but this series easily became one of my new all-time favorite trilogies and series of all time. I loved each book in this series. I do think book 1 is my favorite, then book 3, then book 2, but they're all just so good. Like, I definitely see myself rereading this series in the future. For a like contemporary YA series, these are so like engaging, and usually like with contemporary books I sometimes find myself being a little bored because of like the lack of plot and the focus on just like mundane modern human type stuff, but this series, oh my god, it's so good. Like, it's addicting. I will recommend this series to anyone who will listen. It follows a main character named Lara Jean, who has always been very in touch with her emotions and her crushes especially, and when she was younger she wrote 5 letters to 5 boys that she had crushes on, and she put them in a hat box that her mom had given her, and she never planned on her crushes seeing these. It was just to kind of get her feelings out onto the page. And then one day these letters mysteriously get sent out and she doesn't know what to do, and there's like a fake dating trope, and she's just trying to deal with the turmoil of this crazy incident. And Lara Jean is one of my favorite main characters that I've read from, or about this year. She is just so smart, and I know a lot of people find her annoying, but I think she's just written very realistically, and I think Jenny Han just captures human emotions in such a great way, and she portrays teenagers in such a realistic way. I love this series so much, and I'm really happy that I read it. Number 12 is Lost in the Moment and Found by Seanan McGuire. This is the 8th book in the Wayward Children series, and this was probably my most surprising book of the year, because I did not expect to love this book as much as I did, because this series is one that I really like. I keep up with it every single year, but it's never one that I am obsessed with. Like, I will look forward to the installments and I'll pick them up when they get released, but I'm never in love with the books. I usually give them like 3, maybe 4 stars, but I gave this a full 5 out of 5, obviously. And I just loved the themes in this book. It's so profound, and I really appreciated the fact that Seanan McGuire did not try to do what she usually does with these books, which is to cram a story worth 500 pages into like 160. So I love that it's a slower story. You get to know the characters really well. There's a lot of deep messages and motifs throughout the book. I really loved it, and I'm super excited for the next book in the series because it's also featuring this main character. And yeah, easily my favorite book in the series, and I'm so glad that I decided to continue on with the series and give it, you know, another chance because I was like, maybe I should stop reading these books, but once I read this installment, I was like, no, I have to read these books for as long as they get released. Number 11, I feel like might be a little bit of a controversial one, and that is Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare, the third and final book in the Last Hour series. I have a full hour and something long reading vlog for this book, so I will link that in the description box below if you want to check it out, because I obviously went very in-depth on my feelings on this book, and I have like some non-spoilery thoughts I think towards the end of that vlog that you can watch, and I really loved this book. I don't think it's easily my least favorite in the trilogy, but I still think it is a super solid like read for me. I would not have given it 5 out of 5 stars if I didn't, you know, think that it lived up to the other two books. But I know a lot of people who have been reading this series and loving this series were let down by this installment and this finale just because of like various things that I don't want to get into because it would be very spoilery because this is like the 3 millionth book in the Shadowhunter Chronicles. But I was really satisfied by the ending of the series. I love the characters in this story so much. Like, I think these might be my favorite cast of characters like of all time in any series that I've ever read. They're like up there with the Six of Crows characters. And I just love each and every one of them. I love the different perspectives in this series. I love the plot. Cassandra Clare's writing is some of my favorite in YA, and I was really, really captivated the entire time that I was reading, so I couldn't give it anything less than 5 stars, and it definitely deserves its spot on this favorites list. Moving into the top 10, I have The Diamond Eye by Kate Quinn. This is a book that I actually just read in December, like the tail end of the year, but I'm so happy that I did because I get to include it on this list. And this book is a historical fiction novel that follows the most prolific female sniper in history, who was in the Red Army. And I talked about this in my December wrap-up, so definitely go check that out. But I loved this book so much. I loved the writing. I loved the historical aspect. I think Mila, the main character, is such a complex protagonist, and I loved reading about her internal conflict and just like the way that she, like, I felt like I was on the front lines alongside her, and it is just so beautiful. I love the structure of the story. It's kind of difficult to describe if you don't like actually know what the structure of the story is, but I just think the way that the story is written is genius, and I really applaud Kate Quinn for her originality in that. It easily became one of my favorite historical fiction books of all time, and one that I would definitely recommend to anyone looking for a different perspective on World War II. I think it gives a great point of view to like that time in history, in world history. Number 9, I have Happy Place by Emily Henry. This is a romance book that I definitely want to get my hands on a copy of, but I have her other books in paperback, so I want to wait until this book is available in that format. But I fell in love with this book the second I started reading it. It is easily my favorite Emily Henry book of all time. I've read all 4 of her romance books. I know she does have a few YA books, but I have really only been interested in her romance books, and I was starting to, like, I liked Beach Read. I didn't love People We Meet on Vacation. I really liked Book Lovers, so I was excited to go into this because I felt like her writing was coming back, like, to what I enjoyed in Beach Read. Book Lovers wasn't a perfect novel for me, but I did really enjoy it, so I had high hopes for Happy Place, and it still ended up blowing me out of the water. I read this while I was on vacation, and it was the perfect setting for this book. I love the characters in this story. It's kind of like a fake dating, second chance romance type of trope, but it is the biggest cast in an Emily Henry book, but I think she pulled it off so well. The writing is fantastic. Like, I love the way that she is able to access her characters, like, emotions and feelings on, like, certain situations, and I think the plot in this book is also the most clever and interesting. Like, it kind of goes back and forth in timelines, and the romantic pairing in this book is my favorite of all the ones that I've read from her. So definitely super solid, and I can't wait to read Funny Story, which comes out this year. Number 8 might be a surprising one, and that is Toward Zero by Agatha Christie. I read this book like right before I went to college in August, and I was like really addicted to it. I think this might be my second favorite Agatha Christie book, beneath And Then There Were None. But this is definitely a like lesser known one, but it's actually one of Agatha Christie's favorite books of her own. She noted it as one that's just like a very like unconventional plot, and I would definitely agree with that, but I think she nails it. It basically, the reason it's called Towards Zero is because there are all these disparate storylines that end up coming together towards like the middle where the murder actually happens. So the murder doesn't happen until, you know, you're like halfway or even 2/3 into the book, and then from there there's like a big explosion of like all of these stories coming together, and you learn a lot about like all the different characters. And I think this is one of my favorite like cast of characters in an Agatha Christie novel. She always does like those big ensemble casts, and sometimes I feel like a little lost because there are just so many characters, and her books are usually pretty short, so it's not like they each get like a huge piece of development. But I think the characterization in this book is as good as it is in And Then There Were None, which is a huge compliment from me. But I love the setting of this book. I love all the different storylines that end up coming together, and while I was reading I was like, how are these going to, you know, be threaded into one story, like that one cohesive story? But she does it so well, and I could not put this book down, and it is definitely a mystery that I would revisit because the ending was just so crazy, and I feel like knowing the ending while reading would just give this book a whole new, would give me like a whole new perspective on this book and like new insight. Coming in at number 7, I have A Day of Fallen Night by Samantha Shannon. This is a prequel to The Priory of the Orange Tree, which I actually reread this year in preparation for this book. And this is a fantasy book that follows a bunch of different characters from like different parts of this fantasy world, and like, I really don't know how I would describe this book just because there's so many characters and plot lines, but this is like everything that I want in a epic adult fantasy series. Well, it's not really a series, but like it all takes place in the same world, and there's going to be many more books set in this universe, but this is a standalone book, and it is like, I think I said in my Goodreads review that it is everything I wanted from Game of Thrones. Like, the characters are so complex and intricate, and I just love each and every one of their storylines in this book. I love the setting. The way Samantha Shannon paints a picture in your mind is just unmatched. I love the different plot lines and just the way that she is able to like slowly amp up the story as it progresses until you get to like an explosive like last 100 pages. It is just like a perfect pacing for me, perfect characters, perfect descriptions. I love the series so much, and I can't wait to see what else she does in this world. At number 6, I have Her Radiant Curse by Elizabeth Lim. Elizabeth Lim kind of became one of my favorite authors in the last 2 years. I read Six Crimson Cranes last year, and then I read The Dragon's Promise right after, like, because I had read it close to when the sequel was coming out. Then this year I read the Spin the Dawn duology, which I really enjoyed, and I also read this, Her Radiant Curse, which is a standalone novel that takes place in the same world. It follows two sisters, one is a monster and one is like beautiful, and it's just so amazing. Like, it really pulled at my heartstrings, and I do have a reading blog where I feature this book a lot, so I can link that in the description box as well. And oh my god, it's just so good. Like, the character development in this book is amazing. It's a standalone, so you get beginning, middle, end, it's done, but it is done, well, I said done a lot in that sentence. It is executed very, very well. I think Elizabeth Lim is such an amazing storyteller, and her writing is phenomenal. Like, I can picture this world so vividly, and I just feel transported every time I read a book set in this universe. And oh my god, the characters in this book are incredible, like the way they're written, and just their interactions with one another, and the plot is so, like, addicting to read, and it's just a perfect book in my mind, and I really, really want her to continue writing books set in this world because it's one of my favorite fantasy settings. Number 6 is Beasts of Prey by Ayana Gray. This is the first book in a YA fantasy trilogy, and it follows two main characters as they go on this journey through this magical forest. It takes place in like a fantasy world. There's this whole thing about a night zoo, and it's just this quest book, which I always love, and I read this as one of my first books of the year, and I fell in love with it. It was so addicting for being like such a long book. Like, I think it's it's almost 470 pages long, but I just could not stop reading. I remember like reading this book so quickly because I physically could not put it down, and I remember trying to read it like through every single like free moment that I had at school, and I was just enamored with the story. I loved the characters, and I loved the world that Iona Gray had created. Her writing is also so lush and descriptive and transportive, and I actually just started reading the sequel, so I'm super excited to see how the series continues, and I'm also really glad that I decided to pick this up because I mean, obviously, fell in love with it. At number 5, I have Catching Fire by Suzanne Collins. I decided to finally read the Hunger Games series this year. I had read like parts of the books here and there when I was younger, like when I was watching the movies as they were coming out, but I never really like actually sat down and read the entire series. But I did this year in like March, and oh my god, I fell in love with this book series. I've always loved the movies, but this series just gave me an entirely new perspective on the story. It made me enjoy the movies even more, actually, just because I got to see like their source material. I got to see just everything that went into making those movies as amazing as they are, and I do actually think these books are like even better than the movies, which I did not think was possible, because those are some of my favorite movies of all time. I will never turn them off, but this book series is just, I think, one of the most masterfully crafted series of all time. Like, it is just, the plot is perfect, like, it is a timeless series, and I think this is, like, a masterpiece, this book especially. It is one of my new, like, favorite middle books in a trilogy. I think this is the way that you do a middle book. There's not even one, like, second where this is, like, middle book syndrome. It is a perfect sequel, a perfect middle book, with amazing twists and just outstanding writing from Suzanne Collins. At number 4, I have The Stolen Heir by Holly Black. Tell me how to with no fear. This is the first book in a spin-off series to The Cruel Prince. I reread the entire Cruel Prince series this year, and I had a newfound appreciation and love for the story. I gave all of those books 5 out of 5 stars upon reread, and I am so excited to say that I gave 5 out of 5 stars to this book as well. I just really love any type of story that deals with like a quest and meeting different characters along the way and going to different settings. It's just so fun to me, and I think this book was a great like version of that. It's like Holly Black's fairy version of that kind of great journey type of story. I would say it's probably the most like adventure book that I've read from Holly Black, but I think she does it so well. She definitely also upped the ante in her writing in this book. The prose is just amazing. The descriptions are great, and I really enjoyed our main like crew in this book, the ones that we're following on this journey. And the ending of this book is also one of the biggest cliffhangers that I've ever read, and I cannot wait for the second book in this duology, because I just need to know what happens and how she wraps up this crazy story. At number 3, I have Silver in the Bone by Alexandra Bracken. I love Alexandra Bracken. She just like easily is one of my favorite authors. I love following her on Instagram and watching her writing journey with each book that she crafts, and I have loved basically every single book that I've read from her. The Passenger series is one of my favorites of all time. Probably my favorite my second favorite duology after Six of Crows. And I love the Darkest Mind series. I love Lore. I love Prosper Redding. I really loved Brightly Woven, the graphic novel, and I loved this as well, obviously. This is also kind of like a quest story. We follow a main character named Tamsin, who is a hollower, who are kind of like magical type people who go searching for artifacts, and she finds out that there is this powerful artifact from Arthurian legend that could break the curse that has been on her brother Cabell for years and years. And so they go on a journey through Avalon to find this artifact and see if it will actually break her brother's curse. So there's like riddles and Arthurian legend and Alexandra Bracken's amazing writing and great characters, and like on the back it says, there are 3 magics to be feared: curses born of the wrath of gods, poisons that turn soil to ash, and that which leaves one dark of heart and silver in the bone. I just fell in love with this book. It is so compulsively readable. Like, once I started it, I just had to know what was going to happen. I am obsessed with Alexandra Bracken's writing, and I cannot wait for The Mirror of Beasts, which is the sequel and finale to this duology, because, again, the cliffhanger at the end was mind-blowing, but I shouldn't have expected anything less from Alexandra Bracken. Then, coming in at number 2 is 9 Liars by Maureen Johnson, the 5th book in the Stevie Bell series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. You guys know that I love the Truly Devious trilogy. I read it every single year. I really enjoyed Box in the Woods, and this was honestly like almost as good as the original trilogy in my mind. It follows Stevie as she goes to England with her friends to figure out this murder. There were like 9 people that went to this like English country house, and only 7, I think, are left. And it was like an axe murder. There's just like all this stuff. It's crazy, but it was so enjoyable to read. Like, I loved every moment of this story. We get to see a little bit of Ellingham in the beginning as well, which I loved, and then all of the scenes in England were incredibly fun to read about, and then the mystery itself, it's just so well crafted. Like, I had issues with the mystery in the Box in the Woods, but this one was airtight. I loved it. There's also like a map in this book, which I can show you right there. It's so good. Like, I love Maureen Johnson's writing, I love her mysteries, and I love Stevie Bell so much. And then, number 1, my favorite book of 2023 is none other than These Infinite Threads by Tahada Mafi, the 2nd book in the This Woven Kingdom series. I have an entire, like, 45-minute reading vlog for this book. I am obsessed with this series. It honestly, like, might be better than Shatter Me in some ways. I just love this story so much, and I love these characters and the Persian mythology that's woven into the story. I am obsessed. I think this book is definitely more character driven. It's definitely slower than like typical fantasy books. I don't know, like I think a lot of people were complaining that this book was too slow, and even that the first book was slow, but this book is even slower, honestly. But I did not care at all, because the characters in this series are just so amazing and well written, and I love spending any moment with them, and I would literally read about these characters going to Walmart for like 500 pages. I'm not even kidding. Like, I just loved every single second of this book. It did not do a single thing wrong. Like, 0. This is a perfect book in my mind, and this is a perfect series so far, so I cannot wait for all this twisted glory. And yes, I will be filming a reading vlog. I'm gonna have to wait until spring break to read it, so I'm gonna have to wait an extra month to read all this twisted glory, but it's worth it for the vlog. That is the life of a booktuber. I would love to know what books you all loved in 2023, like what are your top 5 favorite books, if you can rank them. I had a really hard time ranking these, and honestly, the ranking is not set in stone. Like, I think the top 3 is, but like, the rest could kind of shift around depending on my mood. And I would also really like to know any of your thoughts on the books that I just mentioned. But that is it for this video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. All of my social media links are in the description box below, and I'll see you soon for a new video. Bye!